Our children and grandchildren is influenced by the genes that they inherit from us. But new research in the field of epigenetics shows that hard times and we lived through trauma is also transmitted to the next generations. Those who survived the painful experience is reflected in all life. They return to the society with poorer health status, worse job prospects and lower life expectancy. Researchers have identified several different types of inheritance, as events in a person's life can change the level of expression of its DNA and how these changes can be transmitted to the next generation. This is the process of epigenetics when DNA code does not change and modifies gene expression. Tiny labels are added or removed from our DNA in response to changes in the environment in which we live. The researcher Dora Costa of University of California at Los Angeles studied the history of more than 4,600 children prisoners of the Civil War in the United States and compared them with the live 15300 children of other war veterans that have not been captured. Excluding other factors such as socioeconomic status, work and family situation of men, the scientists saw that the children of prisoners had a 11% higher mortality rate than children of other war veterans. The main cause of death, they had a brain hemorrhage and a little less cancer. It is interesting that the negative impact affected only sons injured soldiers, not their daughters. This hypothesis is consistent with research in remote Swedish villages where hunger is experienced by one generation impact on the next few, but passed on only through the male line. To prove their hypothesis, the researchers first ruled out genetic factors. That is, the hereditary traits, such as obesity, which helped to survive under conditions of severe starvation in the camp, but in normal life has had negative consequences for health. They also rejected the psychological reasons. For example, parents with an injured psyche could cruel to treat their children, especially sons, which had a negative impact on their future life. But this explanation, scientists quickly refuted by comparing the health status of children born in the families of prisoners of war. Those of them who were born before the captivity of the father, the mortality rate is not increased, unlike their brothers, who were born after the war. Some studies have shown, for example, that children whose parents survived the Holocaust, had epigenetic changes of the gene associated with the level of cortisol, stress hormone. In the course of the experiment in cages with male mice pumped acetophenin, a substance similar smell to the scent of cherry blossoms. Simultaneously, scientists were struck by an electric current paw animals. To exclude the possibility that the parents could somehow transmit this knowledge to children, scientists immediately after birth, mice were separated from their biological parents. Its sensitivity to the smell of cherry blossom was associated with epigenetic changes in their DNA. The researchers also found chemical markers in the genes encoding the receptor for smell as the olfactory bulb between the nose and the brain. However, despite these important arguments, studies in epigenetics are hampered by one major obstacle. Some scientists believe that it's actually a very rare phenomenon. They explain this by the fact that the vast majority of epigenetic marks is erased completely from DNA in the process of conception, is when the sperm penetrates the egg. Other researchers, however, are convinced that have found the distinctive features of epigenetic inheritance for several races, as humans and animals. Moreover, they believe that understand exactly how it happens. In a recent experiment, the researchers extracted RNA molecules from the sperm of mice that were injured, and placed them in animal embryos whose parents had not experienced a difficult experience. The researchers also found that the length of RNA molecules was associated with different behavioral patterns. For example, the longer RNA corresponds to excessive food intake, changing the body's response to insulin and increased risk appetite. The next step is to decipher Argentine inheritance through the female line. But the task is complicated by the fact that to explore these processes in the eggs much harder. Scientists have found that the impact of trauma is not inevitable. This means that if people inherit a traumatic experience, the impact on their DNA can be minimized by using, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy.